Oh, yes. Why don't you just call some of those well-known companies and ask them where their off-site locations are? Yeah. I'd just like to know what kind of spectrum that they have in there. Yeah. Now, there was a big question of grant and grantor. Yes. Someone who conveys property to another, the settlor. Yeah. And then there was the grant to give or confer with or without compensation. The parents granted the car to the daughter on her 16th birthday to formally transfer real property by deed or other writing. Yeah. The Lewisons granted the townhouse to the Bufords. To permit or agree to, the press secretary granted the reporter access to the Oval Office to approve, warrant, or order a request, a motion, etc. The court granted the continuance. Yes. Now, in the Latin, this whole idea of the grant and grantor, because I really thought I should look at it. Yes. Let's say you granted me the rights of being a parent because of your fraud of issuing a dissolution of marriage. And you'd say, well, I can't reverse my decision. I just can't do it. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to because I never got notice of court hearings. Right. Our marriage certificate's from the United Nations. Yes. And you actually, wonder who that is. Yes. Have an obligation to grant me my rights as an American citizen. Now, why don't you, yes, do that? Because there is this question, right, about granting and grantor. Now, it's things bad in the consent. Contrary, the reason ought not to be drawn into a precedent. Right. Things which are not to be known yet held valid. Every grant is to be most strongly interpreted against the grantor. Now, the grantor is someone who conveys property to another, similar to the United States of America. That's a grantor of the civil rights and civil liberties of the United States of America. Well, why don't you go ahead and remove your fraud? Then give me, yes, my rights as a parent. And then why don't you do that? I'd like to get a phone call from my sons and from Maryland. I like our victims' rights and resources enforced. Yes. And I'd like it if I could pay for my own medical care. Could you enforce those laws today?